This program is brought to you by Pussy Magnets.
Put a midge on your friend with a pussy magnet.
Welcome, my lovely lumps. Or should I say lovely labs? I'm so thrilled to have you here in the Labia Lounge to yarn about all things sexuality, womanhood, holistic health, and everything in between. Your legs. Can never help myself. Anyway, we're going to have vag loads of real chats with real people about real shit. So buckle up. You're about to receive the sex ed that you never had and have a bloody good laugh while you're at it. Before we get stuck in, I'd like to respectfully acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm recording this, the Menang people. It's an absolute privilege to be living and creating dope podcast content on Noongar country, and I pay respect to their elders past, present, and emerging. Now, if you're all ready, let's flap and do this. Oh God, is there such thing as too many vagina jokes in the one intro? Whatever, I'm leaving it in. It's my podcast.
Don't panic, you're not broken. Your sex education was a piece of shit. Get your flaps out and pull up the couch. It's the Labia Lounge.
What's up, labial ledgehammers? We're back with another episode on BDSM, but this time with a submissive angle because I've had a couple of pro-doms on to chat about the dominant side of kink, and so I thought it would be really good to balance that out with some chats with someone who's also experienced a lot and enjoys being on that submissive end of the spectrum as well. So I've got a total babe here, Erin. Is it Kyna or Kyna? I'm so sorry.
It's Kyna. Thank you.
Kyna.
You got it right. You got it right the first time. It's an uncommon name, so it's common to get it wrong. Don't worry.
Okay. I thought it was Kyna, and I was going to check before we hit record, but I characteristically forgot. So anyway, I've got Erin here today to share with us about her experience with kink, BDSM, being submissive, and just to give you a bit of background on Erin, she's a trauma-informed sexuality healer, coach, teacher, and she liberates others from shame, one orgasm at a time. Her journey has been one of a coach and healer on the path to empowerment for the last 12 years, traveling the world, working with leaders, scientists, traditional tribes, and world-class healers, insatiably learning and developing herself and her clients. With an expansive and diverse sexuality of her own, and I can attest to that, God, you should hear this woman talk, Erin is kinky to the core, bisexual, switchy, and polyamorous. And she has experienced every relationship dynamic under the sun. She teaches from a place of radical self-acceptance and embodied truth, having walked her talk and experienced so much of what the realms of sexuality and relationships have to offer. So welcome, Erin. Pull up a quick cushion, get comfy.
Thank you. I actually have two cushions. I've got one under my butt and one behind my lower back. So I am comfy and ready to roll.
Gotta do it. So I sort of alluded to the fact that, your sexuality is incredibly diverse. You've got a lot of experience with BDSM and not just the submissive side, which we're going to be focusing on today. I know that you are a bit of a switch. You like all sorts of different stuff in that realm. So just maybe to get us started and give us a bit of background on you, what's your relationship to kink and BDSM?
Well, it's one that now feels so natural and so authentic. It's kind of crazy that I ever denied it. And I didn't deny it consciously. I just had a lot of shame, a lot of misunderstanding. I had internalized a lot of shame and had really suppressed that part of me, mainly because I felt bad and wrong, or the early kinky experience. My first sexual experiences were naturally kinky without realizing. And then to have other partners be so shocked and disgusted at the things that I had done, I didn't realize that anyone would think that. And then I just shut it down out of fear of not being loved, not being accepted, of hurting someone that I love. And so then I've gone on this journey where it is emerging up and out of me, whether I like it or not. It's coming up in my dreams. It's coming up in my fantasies, and I'm terrified by it. But I also had this amazing pathway I really felt called into it by God. I know that's going to sound so weird to so many people, especially people that have strong religious affiliations, but God pushed me into BDSM. So I was having all these synchronistic kind of things happening, and this calling and this knowing that I had to go down that pathway, but I was like, no, God, I don't want to do that. Like, I am an angel. I'm here to work in the light. I have crawled out of the darkness myself. I do not want to go back. Don't make me go back into the darkness. Like, I can't read the paper. I can't watch the conventional news. Like, those things really impact me. They make me feel shit about myself. I'm not having a good life experience. Like, why do you want me to go into a fucking dungeon? But I would take one step, because this guidance that leads my life has never led me astray. It has led me on the most magnificent journey. So I trust it, but I had some fear and I had some resistance. And so I would take one step, but then I'd get all these triggers because I thought it was wrong and I thought the world was so violent, and why would we want more violence? And this is just codependency, and this is just because of trauma, and we're just, reenacting trauma pathways. But someone would show up on my path that would very lovingly and patiently talk me through those triggers and help me see things from a different perspective. But I had this one experience where I had two lovers, a male and a female, and they were both at a distance. Neither of them were here in Bali. And I'd had a connection with each of them. Oh, actually, no, he was here in Bali and then was leaving. And I had what we understand now as a sub drop. It's after all these heightened hormones and, the body's reacting to these really intense sexual states. And then if you don't moderate the come down of that really lovingly and gently, you can have a crash and you can feel really like, ugh. And because she was online anyway, so she kind of like checked out of our energy. And because he left, I really felt dropped. I felt like I was pushing my edges sexually, and then no one was there to hold me. And then that morning I got some really bad news about a friend whose daughter passed away, and she took her own life in a very violent way. And I was so upset and I was so saddened. And I remember that morning I had to go to the beach. Like, I have the same morning routine every single day, and everything inside me is like, go to the beach. And as I started riding my scooter down that way, I actually passed my friend who lost her daughter. I saw her stepping inside a building. If I was 1 or 2 seconds later, or like the precision at which I actually happened to see her on this street that I'd never normally be in the morning, and I pulled over and I just was able to hold her. And I went, that's what had happened. It was the 6-week anniversary of that passing. And I'd woken up that morning, not only in my own sub drop, but really overwhelmed by my friend's experience. Like, I could see and hear, and I'd done a lot of energetic healing with her too. So we had a very attuned connection. And I was just overwhelmed by her that morning and her pain and her suffering. And when I crossed her in that like divinely perfect moment, I got off my scooter and she's like, it's 6 weeks today, Erin. And I'm like, I know, babe. I felt I could feel how I was helping her process her pain. So I got down to the beach and I was angry and I was saying, fuck you, God, don't make me do this. Like, look at this violence in the world. Look at this suffering. Like, I don't want to do this. Don't push me this way. And the message I kept getting was like, you're exactly where you need to be. You're exactly where you need to be. And I'm like, but I don't want to go into the darkness. I'm an angel and I'm here to do this work and heal people on the planet. And I can't do that work if you're making me go into these dark places. You're exactly where you need to be. You're exactly where you need to be. So at some point I just burned through my emotions. I burnt through my tears. And I was like, okay, I've got myself together. I'm going to go home. And I walked to where my bike was parked, and there was a local guy getting on the scooter right next to me. And we actually backed out at perfect timing again. And so I was kind of facing the back of him as we go to take off. And the back of his shirt said, do not fear the dark, dark pleasure. Whoa. And I was like, what the fuck is that? And then between there and home, which was probably like a kilometer, maybe a kilometer and a half ride, I passed this big green truck, and they sometimes put big stickers and, logos over the front of the truck. And the sticker across the windscreen said, Angel in the Dark. And I was like, fuck. I know I have to trust this. So against all of my resistance, I just took one more step, dealt with what came up for me. Took one more step, dealt with what came up for me. And I've always had a proclivity at choosing a good teacher, at really recognizing who's a good embodiment and not just falling for the bells and whistles and the people with the great Instagram profiles or like wearing all the BDSM outfit. I had this discernment, and I could attract the right person to help me with the triggers, the traumas, the judgments. And then I'd take one more step, and then the right teacher would show itself again. So I feel like, I was being supported on this path at overcoming a lot of internal stuff to get to the essence of who I really am. And so submission was my first step into that, and feeling so satiated. I felt like, oh my God, I've taken my first breath of oxygen. It was like I'd never breathed before. It was just the most oh my God, I was home, I was me. This is the greatest sexual expression of who I am. And so I had a long journey in submission, and it was through some traumatic things that had happened in my personal life, a sexual assault, that actually made me start to explore dominance as well and start to have a more healthy relationship with my own internal dominance, because I am a very dominant person in my life. I'm alpha, I'm a leader, but a lot of that wasn't the healthiest expression of it. It actually had a flavor of defensiveness and protectiveness and resentfulness. And so to learn what healthy dominance looks like, which is about developing that, and I relate it very much with my inner masculine energy, is like moving back into that space, but not from a place of defensiveness. And even though it was post-trauma, it was more so reclaiming a very powerful part of myself that can walk in the room holding this energy of I'm untouchable. Like I walk in and I command this room. And I feel it now because I'm starting at a new gym, and I kind of resist gym culture and gym Instagram culture. And the major gym, I found out this week, the major gym here in Canggu that is like the most Instagram heavy has just banned tripods on the gym floor.
Oh my God.
Seriously.
The fact that they even needed to do that.
I know. So those people are all now attending my gym, which has just opened up because that allows for tripods. So it's like heavy with people that I assume I won't relate with, people that hyper prioritize the external layers of their being. And, my own judgment, my own assumption there is like, it's not about the inner work for these people. They think their value is in their beautiful bodies. And I'm just like, And I walk in that room and like, I'm a curvy person. I do not meet the Instagram fitness standards by any means. And I walk in with such a sense of confidence inside of myself, and I don't let any of that impact me. I don't let that come in. I don't take that as a reflection of me. And I think that's part of my healthy dominance. It's like, I don't need to feel submissive here. I don't need to feel less than here. I don't need to feel like judging myself or comparing myself against these people. No, I have my own value. I bring, basically I think I could fuck the shit out of anyone. That's like my inner dialogue. It's like, don't look at me like that. I could fuck the shit out of you. I do not need to be 10 kilos lighter. I do not need to have ripped abs and an oversized ass. I'm like, I will fuck the shit out of anyone. So, yeah, it's been an interesting journey, but what I can most definitely see is that dominance is an act of service for me, and I'm happy to provide it, and I see where it's needed, and I love what it brings. But the truth of my heart is I am a dirty, dirty, submissive whore. I need that cup filled more than anything else. That space of submission for me, especially as a powerful, confident, assertive person in the world, when I get to go and be small, when someone can truly hold me, when someone's stronger than me, more intelligent than me, more assertive than me, got their shit together more than me, and I get to just melt into a little insignificant little puddle. Oh my God, that's the oxygen. That's the oxygen that I need to breathe.
Oh, epic. Yeah, wow. I've definitely noticed, and I'm not super well versed in that whole scene, but I've noticed a trend with, people that might have a pretty high stress job where they're in a position of power, they've got a lot of responsibility, a lot of pressure. They find it really healing, and they find this amazing release in the act of being submissive in the bedroom, because it's the only place in their life where they can actually just drop their bundle and drop their guard and allow someone else to take control. And do you feel like, being quite alpha and, having your own business and being very dominant and sort of yang in your energy in day-to-day life is correlated with how much you get out of being submissive in the bedroom?
Yeah, for me, definitely. I can see some, and I'll speak heteronormatively here, some submissive women who are naturally submissive people, or culturally, I live in Asia. Cultural submission is very strong here. The women have never had leadership or equality in that sense. So I can see a lot of women who do not take leadership in their lives, and they're very submissive in the bedroom. They're submissive in life and they're submissive in the bedroom. And that's very just a natural and true expression for them. And then I see some other people who are more naturally leaders who don't want to submit or they don't find the pleasure in it. And, I think about my ex-partner, and he's very much like that. He's a dominant personality in every way. And while sometimes he would let me switch, but he was still the leader. He was still holding the container. He would let these states come out of me, and he was just so aroused by my turn on and by, you know, the primal, the viciousness of the primal energy that wanted to just ravish him. But then he'd put me back in my place. He'd let me take the lead. He'd let me feel the whole room, be the biggest fucking whore on the planet. And then he'd like put me back down. And I'd be like, yes, that's my safety. That's what I needed. So I'm really grateful for that space. But he never wanted to submit to me. He never wanted to be on the small side. But there were ways that we could kind of play on the different ends of our spectrum. So I think I am one of the 17% of women that would identify as switchy. So we have, statistically, they say 8% of women are dominant, 17% are switchy, and the rest are submissive. So I think I make up this kind of middle category where I do have a huge spectrum, where I can be very dominant and very submissive. But I think what you were referring to when we see, you know, male CEOs and things like that who, you know, just that stereotypical like, oh, he's got a fetish and he goes and pays a dominatrix to piss on him on his lunch break, and then he puts his business suit back on and goes back to Wall Street.
Yeah, totally.
So, yeah, I think I fall into that category where there's a great relief that comes from being cracked open by having your ego so annihilated through the act of dominance that there's nothing, like you're relieved of every sense of responsibility that you carry, and you're relieved of every, there's a heavy weight that comes with dominance. There's this responsibility. And if you're dominant over other people, there's a responsibility to other people. So whether that's in the workplace, whether that's your family unit, whether that's your friends, like it's big. So to have that cracked in a way, it releases something inside of you that for me, I cannot find outside of my submission. But I think the other element is I'm a deeply devotional person. You know, I have a bhakti heart. I have a spiritual pathway to God and a sexual pathway to God. But ultimately, they're both very devotional pathways. And so I think that there's this element of being relieved of my dominance, my responsibility, everything that I carry in the world. But then there's also this spiritual part of me that gets to be in devotion, like deep, deep, deep reverent devotion to the being that I see greater than me, you know, the God inside that person.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, and I'm like the most vanilla person ever. Well, I mean, I could be more vanilla, let's face it, but on you know, in terms of BDSM and kink, I'm so motherfucking vanilla. And I've tried to dabble, I've tried to see if that's something that actually is wanting to be explored and expressed in me, but for whatever reason has just been shut down. And I'm pretty certain at this point that's just not the case, and I actually just don't resonate with that. But I do really relate, like on a way less sexual or sort of drastic level, that whole thing around, you know, I'm holding the weight of the world on my shoulders in day-to-day life. I'm running a business. I'm trying to, like, you know, make decisions and be disciplined and run the show. And I was the oldest of like 4 siblings and had to take a lot of responsibility and a lot of weight on my shoulders when I was young. And so like my whole life, I feel like I'm kind of having to be quite in that, you know, yang energy. And so I'm not necessarily like a submissive in the bedroom because I'm not as kinky as that, but I do really enjoy an opportunity to just let someone else take the lead and just be a pillow princess and just lie there and receive and not be having to think about what my next move is, not have to make a decision. And, you know, even outside of the bedroom, like not have to decide what we're going to have for dinner tonight and make the moves, make the decisions. You know, I really enjoy it when my partner takes the lead and takes control sometimes with those things. And we share that. But I've been in relationships where I've been with people who are very much in a more, I guess, feminine or more submissive space, and they don't take initiative. They don't make decisions. They kind of don't take the lead. And so it meant that, you know, in my day-to-day life, I was having to do that. And then in my relationship, I was having to do that. And then in the bedroom, I was having to do that. And it was like, fuck, that's a bit much. Like I really need a balance with that. So I kind of relate on a very surface level, but I can't even pretend to kind of understand on an experiential level, you know,
The crazy shit that I do.
Yeah, you know, I don't like pain. I don't like being dominated in any physical way.
Right. I'm not much of a masochist. I wouldn't, and I'm definitely not a sadist, actually. It's one of the small little pockets that I actually don't relate too much to. But I can definitely reach states of eroticism that are so high that if I say, hurt me, daddy, like, whoa, we know we've gone into that realm. You know, like that's what it feels like, energetic traveling through different realms. And when we're in that space, it's because the erotic energy, the turn on is so high in my body that it can't be released. And then if I was to have a flogger across my back, that strike is actually orgasmic. The body has released so many chemicals and stuff, it doesn't feel like pain. But I've been in the place where pain makes me come and I can have pain orgasms. But it's not common for me. I like that I can get there, but I think I love my body and I've put my body through a lot throughout my life in terms of judgment and shame. These days I'm like, oh, but I love myself too much to hurt. But I can definitely understand and relate to people's need for pain or need for a physical expression that's greater than their internal pain. I think that's where a lot of that masochism comes from. But I certainly have met masochists who say pain makes me come and I couldn't explain it to you and I would pay $1 million to the person who could help me understand it. And in some ways you don't really need to understand it. You know, that's something that I've learned through kink is like we don't need to judge the expression or the type of kink. Because in my head I was like, these ones are okay. These ones are a little bit fucked up. Those ones are really, really fucked up. And if you're doing that stuff, there's something wrong with you. You know, it had this hierarchy of kink. Yeah. And so my partner at the time had made me realize it just is what it is. Our own personal erotic expression. We can't go back and pinpoint exactly why it is the way that it is. There's no need to analyze or to judge or to blame. It just is what it is. What's the thing that is going to take me deeper into my eroticism in this moment? And whether he praised me and called me a good girl or whether he called me a filthy little whore, it wasn't so much like, oh, I want to do a praise kink or I want to do a degradation kink. It was like, what does she need in this moment? What's going to unlock her? What's going to take her to that place? So I've learned to put all kink on a neutral playing field and it's a tool. And I can pick up any one of those tools at any given moment because that's what works. So as a dominant, I don't care what comes out of my mouth. It took me a lot to learn how to degrade and humiliate because I had really denied the part of myself that can be mean. I didn't want to be the bully. I have definitely had times in my childhood where I bullied others, and I've had far more times where I was the one that was being bullied. So that was part of my shadow. I could not I am the loving one. Everyone knows Erin to be this giant loving presence. And I'm like, and now I've got to fucking degrade this person and call them a worthless little dirty piece of shit. I'm like, that's hard. You know, that challenged my entire identity about myself. But to receive degradation and humiliation was a bigger journey because it was associated with genuine pain. And I didn't want to feel those things again. Why would I ever want to feel like that? I don't want to feel humiliated. But that is the art of erotic irony, that the things that we don't want in the street, I don't want to be objectified. I don't want to walk past a work site and just have, you know, everyone catcalling me. But on some weird level, I do, because I don't want to go walk past and get completely ignored. So what kink gives us is this opportunity to explore that part of me that does like to be objectified, that wants to be a fuck toy, that wants to be used for my partner's pleasure. But because we're doing it in the context of consent and the framework of BDSM, it's the irony that makes it so sexy. So we can explore these parts of ourselves that we don't in our daily life. And so for me to go into those spaces, I now absolutely love degradation, which is so weird because that was probably, that and humiliation might have been my biggest resistances. And I was having a shibari session with another rigger here on the island recently. And he at one point put his hand on my face and was kind of pushing my face into the carpet, kind of mushing me down a little bit. And I started crying. I was like, yes, degrade me. I'm just, in my head, I'm like, I'm just a filthy little whore. So I cried. It touched me in a way it gave me a release that I needed. And afterwards we sat there in aftercare and I said, I want to tell you why I cried. And he's like, no, you don't need to tell me. And I'm like, I want to. I want us to be in that shared experience, but he's just a more simple kind of rigger. He's just there working the ropes. He's good with the ropes, but he's not there for the emotional and mental play in the same way I am. Oh. So I was like, well, it's very hard to explain when you have a need to be degraded. And he went, oh, I didn't degrade you. Like, he got really shocked. And I was like, well, symbolically, if you're pushing my face into the ground, that's an act of degradation. He does it because he sees that it gets a response, but not because he has an association with it being degrading. So he's just like, oh, no, I'm not degrading you. And I'm like, no, it's a really good thing. I was like, if it's very hard to explain to other people who don't need to be made into a filthy little whore that you're a filthy little whore. And like, I could see the shock and like discomfort on his face. And I was like, okay, mental note, he's not a play partner for me in any way. He can't meet me in those mental and emotional planes. And it's a lot for some people, for most people.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I feel like when I have dabbled in these spaces, I've been really confronted by it. And I just want to say, like, not everyone, if you're listening to this and you're like, oh, fuck, I've never had any urge to explore this stuff, or it makes me really uncomfortable. But, listening to this, or maybe there's just something buried that I need to really excavate and see because maybe I would like it. Yeah, possibly. And then also possibly like there's just nothing there
exactly.
That, you do need to, you don't have, because I feel like when I was in, and I've done podcasts about this sort of thing where you're in the conscious community or the sacred sexuality space or the neo-tantra space, and you're going to all these workshops and trainings and you're around all of these really sexually like charged and liberated people, or so a lot of them, think. And there's this real pressure to like feel the fear and do it anyway and challenge yourself and just like do the things that confront you and trigger you because that's where the gold is, and maybe you'll just break through a barrier to this space where, you learn something about yourself that you now love or whatever. And like, yeah, there is value in that. And at the same time, I didn't love that culture because I just was pushing myself again and again and again, being like, oh, but maybe I am into this thing and there's just too many layers of, repression or trauma for me to realize it. And if I just keep working at it and chipping away, then maybe I'll become this total kink star. And eventually I was like, no, it's actually just not. That's just not me. And that is okay. Like, I've really embraced my vanilla, and I find so much beauty and juice in that. And I think that sometimes it's really beneficial to push edges and keep exploring and peeling back layers. And obviously your journey, you just had the right people and facilitators and experiences come along to do that in a safe way and then figure out, I fucking love being degraded. But that might not necessarily be the case for everyone. And also it might not happen in such a safe way. I feel like there's so many risks and pitfalls that people could potentially fall into when they're trying to explore this stuff, because it's so vulnerable that and there is so many, there's a lot of people out there that don't have enough integrity or experience or knowledge of how to navigate it. And if you happened to be a newbie and start trying to explore this stuff with the wrong person or practitioner, that could be really dangerous. So
and that's very common. It's sadly very common. I really feel like my path was guided. It was God grabbing me by the hair and dragging me, saying, you are a filthy little whore and you're going to love this. There was this inner propulsion. It wasn't it wasn't like, oh, I've got to go and try this because, like, I've done that before, as a meditation teacher. I felt I had to do Vipassana because that's like the Everest. It's the peak. And it validates who I am as a meditation teacher. And so a lot of people in sexuality space are like, fuck, I've got to validate who I am as a sexuality teacher. I've got to do all these things. But it's not the truth. It's this externalized pressure. And so as I'm sharing, I know that this is highly triggering for most people because I was one of you. I understand how triggering it can be. But often what happens is we hear about someone else's sexual expression and we start to filter it through our system of like, oh, that's wrong. Oh, that's bad. It's like, actually, what I'm asking other people to do is simply witness my sexual expression as just what's right for me. It doesn't matter if it's right or wrong for anyone else. It doesn't matter if it's a turn on for anyone else. It's this, healthy independence where you can witness that and say, wow, that really works for Erin. Wow, that's been so healing and transformative for Erin. And it's not for me. And that's the end of the story. That we don't then think, oh, shit, I've got to do all those things Erin does, or like, oh, Erin is a bad person if she does that. Like, well, it doesn't mean anything about anyone else in the world but me.
Yeah.
And for me, it's the most truthful, goddamn liberating, amazing, satisfying, fuck, it just is the essence of my soul.
Epic. Lucky
I've made a lot of sacrifices to be me, you know, to publicly declare that this is who I am, that my business is based around this, has caused me a lot of judgment and criticism from people in my life who I've distanced myself from. I've ended significant relationships in my life because they don't want me to be this. They're confronted by it. They would rather that I shut my mouth and I sit down and I shut up, and that I don't declare this thing publicly because of what it brings up for them. And I've, you know, found the courage to say, I'm sorry, I need to be true to myself.
Hey, Babe Towns. So sorry to interrupt, but I simply had to pop my head into the lounge here and mention another virtual lounge that you've got to get around. It's the Labia Lounge Facebook group that I've created for listeners of the potty to mingle in. And there you'll find extra bits and bobs like freebies or discounts for offerings from guests who've been interviewed on the podcast, inspiring and thought-provoking conversations, and support from a community of labial legends. I also have an account on the fab new app Sunroom, which is a platform created by women for women and non-binary folk, and where there's no shadow banning or censorship of sex-positive content, unlike with the other platforms that I'm on. So you can hit up my Sunroom for extra content and real and raw life updates, because I'll be sharing on there from now on all of the stuff that I can't post anywhere else. My vision for both of these is that they become really supportive, educational, and hilarious resources for you to have more access to me and a safe space to ask questions that you can't ask anywhere else. So head over to the links in the show notes and I'll hopefully see you in there. And now, back to the episode.
I shared something on my Facebook page today about trans porn. The searches for trans porn in the last year have grown by 75%. And I think that is such a fantastic sign of the integration of trans people into our communities. But at the same time, it also increases shame and discomfort, because a lot of people might find themselves attracted to trans, but when they're not comfortable with what's coming up, they'll often project that and deflect that, and then actually can create more unsafety and violence towards trans people. But the fact that it's growing so much is so, it just makes me feel so happy, because sexual expression is so diverse, and our culture has told us that it should only look one way, and that if you vary outside of that, that you're a deviant, that you're wrong, that you're, you know, like a pervert. And, you know, that's something that we reclaim in this world. It's like we proudly say we're perverts, we're deviants. We do deviate from the norm. So,
reclaim the perv. Oh my God. Love it.
So we love being taboo. We love, you know, like I can't remember who I was talking about it with. Oh, a beautiful client of mine. We're doing some inner child processing, and at her core, at her essence, she has a really strong discernment of right or wrong, and she's going to act in the right ways all the time. She didn't need as a child to be yelled at or judged, or like, she would have always made the right choices because that's just who she is. She would have seen what is the right and the best thing to do, and she would have done it. And I was reflecting, that wasn't me. I was the inner child that wanted to go do all the things that we're not meant to do. You know, that's been very alluring to me. But what I genuinely believe is we make up this beautiful mosaic of humanity, and that we each have our place, and that each end of the spectrum has a purpose in society. So for the vanilla people, that is just as perfect as the most kinky people, and for the most heterosexual to the most homosexual, you know, like I have all of these inside of me. I'm attracted to like and I get a kick out of it, you know, with my partner. If we came across a kink that I hadn't found something erotic in it, I'm like, right, let's go make this sexy. Let's like find the eroticism in this kink. And that's very satisfying to me. It was very much about my connection with him. It was about our heart connection. You know, I'm not a fetishist. I'm not someone that can just get turned on by the side of a foot. We talked about this on my podcast. You know, a fetish is essentially that you find something that's typically non-sexual to be sexual. But I'm a demisexual, which means that I've come to understand that it was the most liberal. I read a meme on Instagram and I was like, that's me. A demisexual requires emotional connection in order to feel any state of turn on. So I've never looked at a celebrity and been like, I want to fuck him. I don't know him. Why would I want to fuck that stranger? I don't care how perfect he is. Say I'm walking in the gym with all those buff bodies. I don't want to fuck them. Like, where's the emotional connection? I need the emotional connection.
Totally.
And then all the eroticism opens. So I was in this younger stage of my life feeling very broken because my turn on wasn't reliable. Like, I knew sometimes I could be a really sexual person, and then other times I'm asexual and I could be a nun very happily. I'm like, what's going on? So I'd go to sex parties and I'd see people doing things. I'm in my friend's office right now and I can hear the stuff, and I'm like, these kind of conversations in Indonesia. Yeah, they need a little bit of
just in
discussion.
time. Come in.
I went to a play party and I would see women doing things that I would never do. And they weren't extreme kinks. They were I was just like, oh, no. Feeling so defensive and so like need to put my wall up, and I couldn't understand. In my mind, I'm like, Erin, you know that you're a very sexual woman. Why could that person do that thing and not you? Like I just couldn't piece it together. And of course, what do? We internalize it that we're the broken one. That's something about feminine sex. We're broken. We're not good enough. But actually, we're just beautifully complex creatures. And once we understand ourselves, there's nothing broken about it. So I then came to understand I'm demisexual, and I'm like, oh, I can't feel the emotional connection between those play partners. They're people that just met at a party and said, yeah, let's go do this kinky thing. And my heart is like, warning, wah, 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 like, don't go near there. You're not feeling emotionally safe. So there's no turn on present. So actually I feel almost the opposite. I could feel revolt against it because I'm like, no, that's not for me. So I think part of this journey of sexual evolution that we're on and that the listeners are on is to also just find that total permission to honor what's right for you, and that know that is absolutely perfect. Whatever that cracking the code, I call it cracking the code. It's like each woman is so beautifully, magnificently unique in her own sexuality that there's a thrill for finding out what is it for this woman? What is it that cracks that code? What is it that unlocks all that sexual potential? Rather than, well, I could make her come, so this must be your problem because I could make that come for 5 minutes. Mate.
I remember some friends talking about kinks and what their fantasies were, and sort of asked me like, what's your kink or what's your fantasy? And I was just like, well, just to have like a partner who absolutely loves the shit out of me and to feel really safe and secure in a relationship and know that I'm going to start a family and have a veggie patch and, just like that is my fantasy. That's the closest thing I could find to a kink that turns me on the most is something as simple as that. And that's my truth. So, drastically different to something on the more kinky end of the spectrum, but it's something that does it for me. And I think it's, that's a bit demisexual of me as well. Like very much I rely on the emotional connection and that feeling of deep love and safety and trust with someone. Like trust is fucking hot.
Yes.
But I'd love to do the segment Get Pregnant and Die.
Don't have sex, because you will get pregnant and die. Don't have sex in the missionary position. Don't have sex standing up. Just don't do it. Promise?
So do you have a sex ed related story for us? Maybe something that you wished you'd learnt more about, or that, just a story. I don't know if you remember much about your sex ed, but I'm sure you've got something.
That is so fantastic. So you're asking me for a story about the sex education I received as I was growing up. And well, I remember
maybe how it failed you, or how
it definitely failed.
Actually did a good job.
It definitely failed. It didn't do anything.
Yeah.
I do remember this boy in my grade 5 class during sex ed, and he was a bit of a wild kid anyway. His name was Dylan. I grew up in a lower socioeconomic outer suburb. This was in Canberra. And the teacher was teaching some, very basic sex ed, and Dylan yelled out in front of the whole class, "It's meant to be fun as well." And oh my God, so this kid, someone had taught this kid already, it feels good. It feels good. And that was so contrasting to what we were learning, that all the kids were like, Dylan's going to get in so much trouble. But I'm like, thank you, Dylan, representing the pleasure. Like that was the first time in my life. It was so opposite. I had childhood sexual abuse too, so I'd really learnt that it was all bad and wrong. everything about it because it felt bad and wrong. Any kind of exposure to sexuality just felt so awful because it was so violating. So to hear Dylan, he had his little mullet. Great that that's back in trend again. But yeah, I remember his blonde hair and his mullet just yelling out in front of the class, like as if he was saying the naughtiest thing in the world, that like sex is meant to be good, feel good.
Oh, go Dylan. I love that.
And go Dylan's parents.
Well, exactly. And just so indicative of like the times and of sex ed in schools that like everyone's like, oh my God, Dylan's going to get into trouble for saying that. Because like my school was the same. We would have been like, uh-oh. But he's actually saying something like more valid than anything that they teach you. Classic.
Exactly. And then I went to a Catholic
mullet.
I know. I went to Catholic all-girls high school and I don't recall any sex ed there. And then I went to Catholic co-ed high schools and I don't recall anything there. And then there was a period of time where I went to an awful lower socioeconomic outer suburb state high school that was just like in Brisbane, outer suburbs of Brisbane, that is just like the bane of my adolescent torture, you know. And again, I have no recollection. But I do remember being in grade 12 actually. Like when I came out, I kind of started, I don't think I ever identified as bisexual, but I was making out with girls in clubs and going home with girls and stuff. But we're all on drugs and we're all partying and we're all fucking anyone. Then I met the woman that was to become my ex-wife, well, to become my wife, who we've now ended after 13 years together. And so I started identifying as a lesbian. And I remember going, like these other friends at school from high school would say, yeah, you used to always talk about it, Erin. And I was like, what? They're like, yeah, you used to say you always wanted to try it. And I was like, I have no recollection of that whatsoever. But like everyone at high school was like, oh yeah, we're not at all surprised that Erin's a lesbian. I'm like, I surprised myself. I had to go like grapple with that inner identity shift. I'd have what I would call these lesbian moments where you'd just be driving the car or doing something normal and you'd be like, oh fuck, I'm a lesbian now. Like your identity is shifting and you've gone from, you know, so heteronormative and conventional just because you're born into this society. And then when you become an outlier, you're like, oh, fuck, that's right, I'm different, because I don't feel different. I'm still Erin, but, like, the world is going to treat me differently now, and I'm an outcast. Like, I used to call myself the Trojan horse because I could pass for a straight person. So I'd meet people and then I could see that I was winning them over, that they were trusting me, that we were building rapport and they liked me. And then I'd drop the bomb later into the conversation, be like, oh, no, that's my wife, not my husband. And they'd just be like, and I knew I'd Trojan horse them, you know, got past their defenses because they didn't think that I was different. And then they really had to question their relationship to gay people. You know, this was 20 years ago too, obviously coming out. I think I came out in the year 2000. So things are very different, which is so funny to think about it. Like, my life has been so wild and varied. Like, how the fuck has it been 23 years since I came out? Jesus Christ. Yeah, I'd see these people. Yeah, these people would be like, wow, I like her and I see the sameness in us. And now she's challenged what it means, what my idea of what gay people means.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's so good. I love challenging people and just pushing their edges a little bit.
Yes, and in non-confrontational ways, not, you know, setting off their defenses and their triggers, but just that's why I called it the Trojan horse, you know, just strutted in thinking like, you think that I'm normal. Yeah. Guess what? I'm the kinkiest, filthiest, bisexual bitch that you'll ever meet.
Yeah, and to get back to that, I want to chat about, I guess, safety in this whole realm of BDSM, and especially being a sub. Like, you know, I'm sure there are a lot of risks or things to watch out for, like red flags to be aware of in terms of like when you're starting to explore or like meeting new partners and testing out new DOMs. Because, like we said, there's a lot of people that don't have integrity or maybe don't have the experience to actually handle themselves in a way that's going to be safe for you. And if you're new to it, I feel like once you've been in that world long enough, you can pick it. You can pick the right partners and whatever. You know the sort of pre-framing that needs to be done and the conversations and the boundaries and consent stuff and maybe a safe word or whatever. But if you're new at it and then you happen to start exploring with someone who's either not got the right intentions or they're also new at it and they don't know about all of the sort of stuff that you need to, you know about, like, what are the risks? What are the things to watch out for? have you had any experiences where it's been really unsafe to submit? I'd love you to just talk on that a little bit.
Yeah, thank you. It's a great exploration. My first tip is most definitely to trust your intuition, because I think all of us in hindsight knew the red flags before these things might happen. So it's very important, even more so in these shadowy kind of realms, to be really attuned to your own inner voice and know your own yes and no's, because once you start going into these vulnerable places, like the need for safety is heightened. So we really need to make sure that we are choosing safe partners. So if you've got some red flags, just really listen to them. Don't ignore your own intuition and your own inner knowing. I would say it's really important to practice being able to say no prior to these heightened situations. So, I think the biggest green flag for me in looking for other play partners is community involvement. But not community involvement to the point that it becomes your entire fucking identity, because they're the same as the people at the gym. Like some people just get too into this lifestyle and obsessed with it. And I'm like, okay, that's great. But like people that are community involved, there's an additional layer of safety because we have community rules that we adhere by. So you've got extra pairs of eyes watching you. If someone is breaking rules, if someone is not educating their partner towards consent or breaching consent, that would be flagged in a community. That would be witnessed and there would be ramifications for that. So I like it when people want to keep engaged in the community, because that means I'm happy to be seen. I'm happy for my sexual behaviors to be witnessed by others. If people only want to do this behind closed doors with no one else connected to them, that's the biggest red flag for me, because that tells me that you want to do it in your way and you don't want the potential that other people are going to go, hey, that's not the healthiest choice that you could make there. Hey, I want to watch out for your sub because I think she's losing herself a bit in submission. Because that can most definitely happen. If you have a deeply, deeply, deeply submissive heart, you can absolutely submit to the wrong person. And we become very vulnerable in that state for violation, for exploitation. So nothing bad has happened to me. And I can still see where I gave my submission to the wrong person. And I've been able to take that experience as the greatest lessons for me, for my own empowerment, for learning about myself. And unfortunately in life in general, not just BDSM, sometimes we need to kind of step out of line to get back into line. We step out of alignment. We make a choice and we go, yeah, fuck, that's not for me anymore. And that's the very thing that forces us back onto our path with more conviction than ever. Like if you wanted to launch your own business, you might just take on one more job for other people and get there and fucking hate it and lose your soul in this fucking soul-sucking work, and then go, nah, this is it. I am going to launch my own business now. I'm going to stand on my own 2 feet. And we needed that final little out of alignment moment to really believe in ourselves. So in some ways, when I'm talking about minor breaches in BDSM, sometimes we do need to kind of go too far and go, oof, you know what, that is not actually for me, and I don't want to go there again. Or it felt right in the moment, but as I sat and processed it for the next couple of days, I didn't really like it. So therefore I know next time that's a no for me. So in some ways there's learning curves in everything. So to kind of expect to walk into this world and get it all perfect and get it all right is impossible. We all have to learn through experience. As well prepared as we can be and as safety oriented as we can be, also have some grace with yourself, because it's likely that you might cross your own boundary in some way as you're learning. That's how we go, oh, fuck, I've got a boundary there. That's my edge.
Oh, totally. Yeah. I am keen though to to hear about you said the most prepared you can be and the safest you can be, still there's going to be an element of trial and error and experience. But I'm worried about, the people that have a lot of trauma, they're, maybe deeply submissive, and that could even be coming from a place of trauma rather than an authentic sexual blueprint. And I'm wondering, especially for the people who don't really feel comfortable or want to be in a room expressing their sexuality in front of other people. Because for me, I'm just oh, fuck that.
Yes.
What if I wanted to explore this but in private, sex normally is,
Yeah. Community involvement doesn't mean to only go to play parties, but it means to be actively in the community. You've got friends, you might attend certain events, you'll attend workshops, you'll do up-levelings of your skills. So all of that can still happen in absolute privacy and still have the safety level of community involvement. This is someone that's respected by the
maybe meeting your dom at one of those events so that you
Yes.
already know that they have some accountability
That's
and they're
exactly
part of
right.
the community rather than just like a totally brand new person from an app or something.
Yeah, exactly. So for me, because the community here in Bali is underground because we have a Muslim federal government, so sex is prohibited. So that in one way makes us lose a level of community safety because you can't go to the police and say, hey, I was at this play party and this thing happened.
Yeah.
So I personally am not in line with the ethics of how kink is mostly expressed here in Bali. It doesn't make me feel good, doesn't make me feel safe. It's not what I'm looking for personally. And I could feel that straight away. I could feel like there was a deep inner knowing, this is not it. This is not it. And maybe that's my spiritual connection. Maybe that's because I'm a healer. I knew the profundity that was possible. I knew the depth of connection that was possible. And just to watch all these people get drunk and just do loose, wild shit without respecting boundaries and consent and stuff like that, I was like, no.
Yeah.
So I actually did a lot of research online and I went and sought out the best teachers in the field. And obviously America and Europe are two huge hubs for BDSM. So I found online workshops. I could not get enough. I was reading every book I could get my hand on. I was going to every online webinar. I was buying online courses and fuck, it was the best. It was the absolute best because it set the standards so high to help me understand what I'm looking for. I read a lot about submission, but I read so much more about dominance because that is what set the standard for me for what I'm looking for. That if I know, I've got goosebumps everywhere. If I know what dominance is and I know what makes a good dominant because I've researched it, then I can apply that, benchmark to this person.
Yeah.
Do I know more about dominance than you? Well, I'm a sub. So that's a red flag. So just the research online, the kind of educators that we have in the world who are expressing this at such high levels of consciousness and with such passion, like they were my teachers when I didn't have it in my immediate environment. So
great. Yeah, good suggestion. Just do your research, do some courses, maybe work with a practitioner just to get a sort of set the bar and know what to expect and what to look out for, I guess. Because the other thing I was thinking is, yes, listen to your intuition, but a lot of people through, trauma don't know how to, like they've lost sort of connection with their intuition, and it's going to be a lot trickier for those people to be able to listen to that, especially with these things. And that's another thing I'd love to talk about, which I have, I've had people on the podcast to speak about before, is like trauma and kink. And I know that there's a I mean, from speaking to you in the past, I know that you believe and have experienced personally like a very deep healing that's possible through kink. And then I also, know on the other side of it that a lot of very traumatized people wind up with kinks that potentially aren't actually healthy or in their best interests. And I just want to know, like, how do we know if our kink is coming from a trauma that's not a healthy pattern or whether it's authentic or, like, how do you kind of navigate that whole realm?
Excuse the interruption, my loves, but I'm shamelessly seeking reviews and 5-star ratings for the potty because, as I'm sure you've noticed by now, it's pretty fab. And the more people who get to hear it, the more people it can help. Reviews and ratings help me curry favor with the algorithmic gods and get suggested to other listeners to check out. Plus, they make me feel really good and appreciated as I continue to pour my heart and soul into creating this baby for you. And I promise I don't mazz over them or anything. I mostly just tuck them away for a rainy day when I'm filled with self-doubt and existential dread about being self-employed, which is fairly frequently. So you see, leaving a review really does make a difference, and it's an easy little act of support that you can take in just a minute or two by either going to Spotify and leaving 5 stars for the show or writing a written review and leaving 5 stars over on Apple Podcasts. Choose your poison, or if you're a real overachiever, you could do both. Whoa now. If you are writing a review though, just be sure to only use G-rated words because despite the fact that this is a podcast about sexuality, words like sex can be censored and your review won't actually show up. Lame. Anyway, oh, what was that? Oh, you're going to go do it right now while I wait. Okay. Yeah. No, that's a great idea. May as well just quickly click that 5-star button before we get on with it and, forget about it and get on with your day. I'm hearing them roll in. I'm hearing those 5 stars. Oh my God, I make myself cringe. Anyway, Thank you much, Lee. You're a total gem, and I'll let you get back to the episode now.
I'm so glad you asked me because I was thinking in my head, we got to talk about trauma. So lots and lots of thoughts around this. They have done studies that there is no higher percentage of sexually traumatized people within BDSM communities as there are in control groups. So that was so validating for me to hear. There are, however, higher numbers of securely attached people identifying as dominants and higher number of anxiously attached people identifying as submissives than control groups. So we do see some attachment trauma, more attachment trauma showing up. But I also think the fact that there's a higher prevalence of securely attached dominance, it's an incredible healing space. It actually helps heal attachment trauma for the submissive who needs anxious attachment. I find my safety in closeness. I need someone. And then that sense of ownership of you're my sub and I'm here to protect you is the most soothing, satisfying thing and a great space for healing and growth. So for healing, some people just want the Band-Aid. They just want the thing that makes them feel good, and that's as far as they want to go. I've alleviated my symptoms. For some people, they actually want to dive into it, dig it up, clear it, and be free no matter what. So I fall into that second category of like kamikaze, head first, dive myself into any personal work I can do.
Roll up the sleeves, let's do this fucking thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So kink, everyone's personal experience with it is different. And like I heard the most beautiful analogy once. It said some people say that they like music. Yeah, I like music. Some people say, oh my God, I fucking love music and I go to concert like I love music. And then there's a third category of people who say, I am a musician. It is so inherent in who they are. Like, I am a musician. And that's what kink is for me. I am this thing. So at those varying levels of our relationship with kink, we have varying opportunities to resolve our trauma if we want to. So when I first stepped in, I saw a lot of resistance, like, don't use your dom as a therapist. Like, this isn't a space, like, go get therapy outside of it. Like a resistance to people using it for healing. And that wasn't my truth. My truth was like, this is the healing. I know I can heal myself, and I know. So the first time I got tied in ropes, I had such a overwhelming experience. I was like, I need to do this for others. I need to take people, give them a space to surrender into the goddess inside themselves through ropes. So with willing and consenting participants who have that kind of healing focus, BDSM is the most amazingly transformative place for healing. But if you're bringing your trauma in and you're putting that on someone else and the responsibility, like heal me and fix me, and that person's not a healing-oriented kind of person, that's non-consensual. It doesn't feel good. We don't want to see that happening. So if someone does have some traumas and they just want relief, like let's say there's someone who tends to turn towards self-harming as a means to manage their internal emotional state, and they then want to turn to BDSM and experience pain through BDSM. If people consent to that and that's truly what they want and they're doing it in that kind of environment, I'm going to let them do it. It's not up to me to judge. It's not up to me to judge or assess what's right or wrong for them, as long as consent is at the core of it, that both of them know that they're going there. I would love everyone to heal. I would love everyone to transform, but that's unrealistic. So I also have just some compassion and understanding and allowance that not everyone wants to do that. And some people want to reenact their trauma. So when I think about the energetics of it, if we're holding any kind of trauma or PTSD within our energy system, there are ways that the intensity of BDSM puts us into that freeze state or into those traumatized states, and it can feel transcendent because you've dissociated. And that, I would say, is not the greatest practices. You can take the same trauma into BDSM and not overstimulate the nervous system, so you're more in a state of integration and you can truly reach a transcendent place and a loving, healing place, and you've moved certain things through your body. So I think it's asking for an extremely high level of self-awareness of yourself in that state of, am I checking out? Am I dissociating? Am I harming myself? Or am I fully present in this experience? Am I taking it one step at a time? Is my nervous system still regulated even amongst this intensity? Like even me at my level of experience and self-awareness, that's hard for me to even do, because I do get into this drug-like state when I'm in there. It is my drug. It's all the happy hormones are moving through you, and I'm connected with my lover and we're moving through energetic realms. there's absolutely times where I've triggered myself and I've gone too far, but fuck, the bloody little emotional masochist inside me loves it, loves being on the edge, loves being pushed, loves the fear, like there's something in me that loves the fear, that predator prey kind of like, God, you're going to take me. Like, I enjoy that. So I have to be really mindful of myself and use my own self-awareness. And if I've got a great Dom, also get that Dom to reflect back to me and say, baby, I saw you check out there. Or like, are you still with me? Or are you checking out? Like just having that, it can be executed at such high levels of energetic attunement that we're sharing the same nervous system. And you can really, like, someone can help you regulate in those intense states, or someone can be pushing you to activate PTSD and trauma pathways in the nervous system and energy system. So it's a really nuanced, really, really nuanced world. And, if everyone came to me, we'd all be having a happy healing time. We'd be using all of it as a pathway for growth. But that's not where everyone's at. And sometimes it's difficult to find play partners who want to share that with you, but it's absolutely possible.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think if I, when I have dabbled a little bit, it's been so important because I'm brand new and I don't know, at the time when I was exploring, I didn't know whether it was my intuition, whether it was me actually wanting something, or whether I was just challenging myself, or whether it was a trauma pattern or pressure that I was put. Like, there was so many factors. So it was important to find someone who was incredibly experienced and I trusted a lot and had a lot of integrity, because then, they could kind of have my back when I couldn't have it. And so I suppose, like, my thought would be, like, if you're wanting to start exploring, the most important thing would just be, like, walk before you run. Just ease into it so incredibly gently and gradually that there's no, like, sudden movements or big leaps, so that there isn't going to be that really huge, like, holy fuck, like, I've gone too far, I'm triggered, I'm in a, Do you need to put your computer charger in?
Yes, I do. I need to charge my laptop. But what I wanted to say to that was, having someone hold your hand as you enter the community is a really great thing. Someone that's more experienced. Like, you might not think that you've got kinky people in your world, but I guarantee you've got kinky people in your world. And there's a lot of people who want to care for newbies as they enter the scene. And there's a lot of people
what it was like.
who target newbies, like the red flags of the people who are like, oh, fresh blood, she's naive. She's going to think I'm a big bad Dom and I don't even have to be that good, and she's going to idolize me. So I think like having a friend who can watch you and just check in and moderate with you and just be like, do you really feel good about that, babe? Are you going a bit too far? Or like, I can see this is really good for you. Like, having that other person help with that process is amazing.
And something else that I wanted to cover before we wrap up as well is aftercare, because that's something that, is incredibly important, and I think some people don't make time for, or don't, again, if you're a beginner, you might not realize the importance of this and, how essential it is, especially if you have been challenged or triggered, or things have come up, or things have been just that little bit outside of your window of tolerance, or at an edge for you. Like, the difference between it being really re-traumatizing and it being healing can be that aftercare piece. So could you speak a bit on that?
Yes. Every vulnerable exchange requires aftercare. That was one of my biggest resistance. Like, why are we doing this thing if you need to fucking aftercare people to manage it? Like the fact that we need aftercare is so wrong. And one of my first dominants said to me, Erin, every vulnerable exchange requires aftercare. And it's such an amazing practice in life in general. If you know your friend's going through a hard time and you've been on the phone with her and she's just been crying, going through stuff, like, what does it mean if you send her a text the next morning and say, hey, babe, checking in, how are you feeling? It's like, oh, thank you, you're still with me. This doesn't just end. It doesn't just drop off. And like, that kind of transactional sex, we've all had it. We've all had someone have access to the intimacy of our body and then just ghosted emotionally or physically. And it feels awful. So to go to these even more vulnerable places through BDSM heightens that need for aftercare. So it's working on the physiological layer. As I mentioned earlier, it's helping you navigate that gentle come down from the hormonal high. So that can happen. I really enjoy physical touch. Most people would say a nice cuddle, some verbal processing, which was my resistance with that Shibari experience where he was like, no, I don't need to know what you're crying about. And I'm like, we were in this together. This is a shared
maybe I need to share.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I can hold myself well enough, I wasn't shut down by that, but someone who's new or someone who's more vulnerable could take that really,
Totally. Yeah.
like that can be really harsh to hear that. So for me, physical touch and maintaining that emotional connection is of priority. The physical, like hormonal kind of downside to thing. But yeah, what often happens is that we start to return back to our rational and logical mind and can start to process some of the more heightened spiritual, energetic, and emotional experiences that happen in BDSM. So one of the most empowered things we can do is just really know what we need for aftercare. And you can even create an aftercare kit. So I made a playlist of my favorite tracks that were the most soothing, the tracks that felt like a big warm blanket. You can have a blanket ready. You can have some dark chocolate ready. And you can literally go into it with the expectation that when we finish, you're going to wrap me up in this blanket, or you're going to put me in the bath and brush my hair and just talk to me. I know.
Love that.
I know. So when you might not know, and that's okay, and a good dom can help you with that, but the more experience that you can have and the more you can think and prepare for these things, then you can really set yourself up for a really loving, nurturing aftercare experience. Typically you'll need water, but that's the same as every, endurance activity. But depending on your relationship with food and your blood sugar levels, like food could be good. For me, I tend to not really be hungry after sex. It's not the way my energy is flowing through my body, actually, because like it has a lot of upward, outward flow. So to put food in and try and digest it down isn't so good. For me, mostly I need to moderate that very energetic drug-like state, that transcendent state, and I can be a little bit dopey and a little bit slow. And it's nice to be taken care of like a little baby. And I remember once, it was one of the most intense BDSM scenes I've ever done, like one of my heightened fantasies. And afterwards, are you going
to tell us about it though? Come on.
I may have mentioned this to you before when we were just chatting casually, when I got fucked by chains. Did I mention this?
Yeah.
So
Nice.
I was chained to the bed, which is such a sign of ownership for me. Something about the metal I love metal. I love metal dildos. There's something so primal. It's so unnatural to shove a chunk of metal in your cunt. So I love it, the weight of it, the sound of it, the temperature of it. So it was being chained, which is a huge psychological thing for me. But then he also put the chain inside me. So he wrapped it around his fingers and he put it inside me and fucked me with it. And it just, oh my God, it was everything. It was ticking all the boxes for me. And afterwards I was so nonverbal in a beautiful way, like that also happens after really intense meditations when you can't come back from that meditation quite so quickly and you want to stay in that half state. And so he got cushions and put them in the kitchen, carried me, put me on the floor in the kitchen to curl up, put a blanket over me, cooked for me, sat on the ground with me and fed me really slowly. And it just, 30, 45 minutes of slowly, like so much tenderness after something that was so brutal and so good and so intense, like fulfilled so many, like I didn't even know we were going to go, it was just layer upon layer upon layer, like just more and more and more and more and more of what works for me. Oh my God, it was just so good. But that level of tenderness and care, but even like I'm still on the floor, like a dog bed kind of style. I put cushions and you're in like there's still this element of like, you're the submissive. I'm still holding you in that space that you're little and I'm big and I'm doing the labor here and your job, you can't take responsibility back yet. And it was just such a nice thing to
exactly
be
what you needed.
Yep. And so slow, so caring. And there's been other times with that partner where he has just like got up and got back into this other mode. And I'm like, I cannot move that fast yet. And he's like, oh, sorry, I'm back, but like I can notice when he pushes his edges, because tops and dominants, they also need aftercare. When he would push his edges and potentially come up against his shame edges of the things that he felt good receiving or bad receiving or didn't feel good about himself about certain things, his strategy was to kind of disconnect and go a bit avoidant and just like not sit with those feelings too intensely. So, yeah, I noticed one time through a worship session, actually we'd broken up and I gave him a really my heart just wanted to worship him, even though we're in this really painful separated place. And he received it. But afterwards, I think he just was like, it was too vulnerable. It was too emotionally raw. And and I said, I need you to hold me for longer. And he was like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm back. And he took me to the shower and he washed me down in the shower. But, you know, it's a lot of pressure to say to the dominant, you have to give me aftercare now, because they've been in just as much intensity as you have. So it's also a really good practice as a submissive to know what your top or your dominant needs for their aftercare and what do they potentially need to verbally process. Like if someone is exploring their sadism and they're acting in a way towards a woman that society has told them you're not meant to hurt women. Like that guy that tied me in ropes, he had shared that with me when he first started getting into impact. He said, the little boy inside of me is twiddling his thumbs going, oh, this is bad, this is wrong. She's really wet. Like I can see that she's responding, but the little boy inside of me, I got taught to respect women. I'm not allowed to do this. So, you know, that's the kind of processing they have to do too. So we also need to be aware enough and capable enough to hold space for that. And let them process without taking it personally, without feeling like you've done something wrong or you've taken them somewhere they didn't want to go. It's a totally. Treacherous kind of territory, you know, we're playing on our edges and our dark edges. So
well, I mean, that's why so many people in that space have incredible communication skills because you need to talk about all this stuff before you get into the bedroom. You have to, you know, chat about what your requirements are for aftercare and all of the, you know, I mean, pre-frame the whole sort of session, right? And that's like a lot more communication and verbalizing things than most people would do before they fuck.
Yep. Exactly. And then you take that with you everywhere. You start using consent and negotiation in everything. You go on a date with someone and then you go to wrap up the date and you say, I've had a really nice night and it would feel good if you sent me a text tomorrow morning. It's like, oh, why haven't we all been doing that? That's so basic. Like, I'm going to feel like shit if you never contact me again. So I'm just going to express my need now and ask for what I want and say, please give me this aftercare. Please don't emotionally disconnect from me, especially if you go home with someone and share vulnerably. And then you get in your Uber to go home or whatever, you can say, I've had a really nice night and it feels really good to me to be in communication tomorrow. Can you text me and check in the morning when you wake up? It's like, like, why aren't we all negotiating our sexual experiences? You know, the common culture is not to have any language around it at all. You just go home and get it on. And so now I can very comfortably say, I'm going on a date, but just to let you know, I never play on the first date. Like that's just my rule in general. Even if the chemistry is high, I let it simmer. I go home and I make sure that I'm in the right mind space and I've thought about this, not from a heightened place, but this is truly what I want.
It's a good rule.
So, I tell them in advance, hey, I don't play, and then we go on a nice date, and if there's something good, it's like, I really can't wait to see you again, and, you know, I'm feeling a bit emotionally vulnerable. I'd like to go home or like next time I say, I'm ready to make out and I would like to explore each other's body, but I'm not ready yet emotionally for penetration. Like these are just the standard negotiating skills that we have in BDSM that you must have. You must be able to explicitly consent. It's like, yes, I want impact. Or like I remember one time I tied ropes with someone who usually we go quite intense and he'll use pegs and he'll use the little Wartenberg wheel, the spiky wheel, and he'll do some spanking. And thank God he asked me that day because I was ready to just fall into our routine. Like in my head I was thinking I'm feeling really sensitive and sensual and I just want one of those sensual ties, but I didn't think to communicate it. So he said, do you want pegs? And I was like, oh, no, I don't. He's like, do you want the wheel? And I'm like, no. He's like, what about spanking, nipples? And I was like, no, actually none of that. It's like, thank God. I would have just led myself down a path that no one else is to blame, but I would have put myself in a position where something could have happened that I didn't want simply because I didn't negotiate. Common. Yeah.
And I think so much, like I've spoke about this recently on the podcast, there's this complete lack of communication around especially like casual hookups or new connections. It's like we're all afraid that if we actually say something like, oh, I'd really appreciate a text tomorrow, or I don't fuck on the first date, or you know, we express our need, they're going to think we're a loser and they're going to fucking bail. And I'm like, well, do you know what my answer is to that? Firstly, fuck those guys. What a dickhead filter it is. It's weeding out the ones that don't deserve to fuck you. And secondly, like if you are not mature enough to communicate about these things before you have sex, you should not be having sex. Simple as that. Yeah.
And if you're looking for approval from these other people and don't have the confidence to, you know, if you feel that you need their desire, like that's such a disempowered state to be in, to put all that on the other person. Like, I want them to approve of me. I want them to want me. And like, I don't want to jeopardize that.
I don't want to say anything to mess it up or make them feel off put or like think I'm weird, or like we're always in this. Yeah, it's so common to be in this place of disempowerment with that sort of thing where we're worried about messing it up, and that if we say something like that, it's gonna turn them off. And I'm like, well, do you know what? If someone said that to me, that would be a green flag. That'd be a massive turn on if they were actually like, cool, let's chat about like sexual health stuff and protection, and you know, are you sleeping with other people? Like, what are your expectations? Things like this. Like, it's so beneficial to collect this information and get into a place where you're comfortable talking with this new person about it, because how the fuck can you expect to trust someone to, you know, let them into your body and into that intimate space with you if you don't even feel comfortable enough to have that conversation because you're worried they're going to jump ship thinking like you're weird or you're too much, you're too needy, or, you know?
Exactly. It's such once you start stepping into this level of maturity, even if you're the one taking the lead and those other people are not accustomed to these kind of conversations, it still can go really well. And then we can also kind of lead that revolution where that person's like, oh, that was really good. And I like that conversation. And like, oh, next time I go on a date, I'm going to have that kind of conversation. The first time I had a kind of STI challenge, I'd met this guy on a date. I did sleep with him after breakfast we met for breakfast, and like it just, everything was good about it. This was probably 5 years ago. And I went back to his hotel room. We had an amazing morning full of passion, and I had to leave by 11 a.m. because my mum was downstairs checking out of our hotel room. Came down with my hair everywhere, my mascara under my eyes. But everything about that experience was positive, and he and I are still Instagram friends, just a good quality dude. And short time after, I was in Canada, and he sent me a message and said, Erin, I'm really sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but I've tested positive for chlamydia. I feel that you're safe, but it's still, I've put my ego aside because I care more about your health and your safety. And you'll need to get a test. And I was like, wow, I love you even more. So much respect for that conversation. Yeah. And he was like, wow, Erin, the way you're receiving this, like, I feel like you're healing me. And I'm like, yeah, I feel like you are too. You're helping me navigate this first kind of tricky conversation that I've had. I'm giving you a very positive experience that really, you know, conditions you to continue.
That it was a good thing to tell me.
Yeah. So I went to the clinic. I got a test. It was a gay clinic, and the nurse was fucking amazing and gave me so much more education. Everything about that was positive. And she said, you don't even need to get tested. You can take the single dose antibiotic and blah. And I said, no, I'd still like to get tested, because if it was me that gave it to him, if I had it before him, then I need to speak to my previous partner and blah, 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 blah. And in the end, I didn't have it. And I felt grateful that I'd gone through that entire lesson and that I'd got all the gifts out of it, and I didn't actually have to put any medication in my body. It was a really big, amazing sex ed experience. Everything that high school lacked. But
totally.
He and I together set the stage for really empowered conversations around that. And then subsequently I met a friend who teaches about STIs. She's had herpes, and she's had herpes type 2 and HPV, and there's something else as well. She has common outbreaks, and so she does a lot of education about it. So one day she and I went for a walk, and I said, how could I best receive that conversation with you? Like, as someone that's STI positive and needs to disclose all the time, what's the best way for me to handle a conversation like that if I come across it? And it was just fucking awesome to speak to someone who's had a lot of, you know, painful experiences disclosing throughout her life, and to really kind of empower myself to have these conversations in a really safe and comfortable and neutral way. There's no charge, there's no disgust, there's no shame, there's no judgment. It just is like, let's talk about
so healing.
Health. Yeah.
So healing for someone who's positive. Like, I've got an episode on herpes and one on HPV and one on STIs. And in all of those, I chat with these guests, these amazing guests that I have, about like disclosure conversations and how that's gone for them and where they're at with that. And it's such an important, valuable thing to familiarize yourself with, even if you are not positive for any STIs, like you may be with someone who discloses to you that they are, and the way that you respond to that is so important and is like a massive thing for them. And it can go, you know, it can make or break, and can be really traumatizing for them and horrible and judgmental and shamey, or it can be really healing and accepting and beautiful.
Hey, me again. If you'd like to support the potty and you've already given it 5 stars on whatever platform you're listening on, I want to mention that you can buy some really dope merch from the website and get yourself a Labia Lounge tote, tee, togs. Yep, you heard that right. I even have Labia Lounge bathers. Or a cute fanny pack if that'd blow your hair back. So if fashion isn't your passion, though, you can donate to my Buy Me a Coffee donation page, which is actually called Buy Me a Soy Chai Latte, because I'll be the first to admit I'm a bit of a Melbourne cafe tosser like that. And yes, that is my coffee order. You can do a once-off donation or an ongoing membership and sponsor me for as little as 3 fat ones a month. And I also have a Sunroom profile over on the Sunroom app, as I've mentioned. And I also offer one-on-one coaching and online courses that'll help you level up your sex life and relationship with yourself and others in a really big way. So every bit helps, because it ain't cheap to put out a sweet podcast into the world every week out of my own pocket. So I will be undyingly grateful if you support me and my biz financially in any of these ways. And if you like, I'll even give you a mental BJ with my mind from the lounge itself. Saucy. And I'll pop the links in the show notes. Thank you. Later.
Yeah, and before, I'm just looking at the time thinking, I haven't done a TMI, and most of the things we've been talking about is a bit TMI, but I'm wondering.
But give me, give me something. I want to do this. Don't let me miss out on this experience. What is it? Tell me. What's TMI?
The TMI We Love It segment is basically where I ask guests for a story that would usually be considered too much information, and I've rebranded it Too Much Inspiration, because I think it's really inspiring to chat about the taboo and the stigmatized and the, you know, the stuff that's usually not spoken about openly, and that there's a lot of judgment and shame around. So this, you know, that's kind of the thing behind the whole podcast is like, let's destigmatize everything that is taboo. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure you've got the goods here. Do you have a TMI story you feel like sharing with us?
TMI, we love it. Said TMI, we love it.
Well, the first ones, I've got 2 that come to mind, and one's a pretty simple one that perhaps people have talked about before, but it was when I was sharing butt plugs with my friend.
What do you mean? Like you had a collection that you shared?
I have a collection, yes, and we live in a country where sex toys are not so easy to come by, and she had asked me for some advice on how to start exploring anal, and I said, you definitely need butt plugs to do some training. And she's like, where do I get those? And I was like, well, I could send you some. I have a huge toy collection. And she's like, this is like the new age friendship bracelet.
Sisterhood of the traveling pants.
Yeah.
Traveling butt plug. Love that. I've actually let my friends from butt plugs back in Melbourne, so I get it.
Yeah. It just was a nice, very comfortable thing between friends that love and respect each other. So I really enjoyed that. But the first thing that came to mind was actually sharing about my favorite kink, which is very rare to come across actually, but it's something called sounding, and it's about using the urethra. So a sound is a medical instrument that they use. So when a man has a catheter, they slide a sound down his urethra. And so in the kink community, it has been discovered that this could also be very pleasurable. It can be a very scary, and especially for men, any kind of penetration requires a certain level of mental preparation. So if a dude isn't ready to have a prostate massage, he is 1,000,000 times not ready to be sounded. But if he's comfortable with penetration and if he's done that work on himself, then the sensation that comes with sounding for men is like a constant orgasm. So you actually, the sound can be metal or it can be silicone, but essentially when the cock is flaccid, you very slowly and very gently insert this thing down the length of the urethra and they'll start ejaculating. This constant stream of ejaculate can come out. And so then you can start to stimulate the cock. You can suck it, you can ride it, but it's such a slow and intimate and trusting space to go there with someone. And so, Siri just told me I didn't get that. Could you try again?
Urethral sounding, Siri.
Go away, Siri. I don't even know how you picked up on that. So the female sound, because the female urethra is smaller anatomically or shorter, the female sound is quite different. But again, it's in this really slow and gentle kind of sensual way. It almost, the one that I like is like a little swizzle stick. It's metal, of course, and it's grooved, but very slowly and gently my partner kind of twists it and slowly inserts it. And it is so insanely pleasurable, which makes sense because all of our anatomy down there is made for pleasure. So it feels like getting fucked in one of your holes. It's just a different hole.
The urethral sponge is the G-spot, so it's literally surrounded by erectile tissue.
Exactly. And it's tight. It feels like it's such a small opening, but my God, that makes me come like a wild animal nonstop. And I just love it. And I think I'm so sad for the billions of women on the planet who will never know that pleasure in their bodies.
Yeah. No,
So
I feel that.
I have a friend who she was starting to experience some symptoms of BV, and she lives in a remote part of America, and she would use boric acid suppositories to kind of treat it. So she woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning, was not feeling balanced, went and found a suppository, put a little bit of lubricant on it and put it inside her. But then she was like, oh, it's not going in. This is really weird. And she's a nurse as well, so she knows anatomy. And she's like, what's going on? Why is it not going in? And she got out a hand. She turned on the light and got a hand mirror out, and she'd put it in her urethra. So the poor thing had this boric suppository acid, and she's like, boric acid suppository. She's like, Erin, I couldn't have done that if I was trying to do that. She's like, I legit don't know how I did it. She ran a bath. She sat in the bath. She waited for the thing to dissolve. But she left me a voice memo and was like, Erin, you're the only person in the world I can tell this story to, but I put this suppository in my urethra. And my response was like, oh, yeah, I've been fucked in that hole before.
Oh my God, that is the most out there story I reckon that has been. It's a stiff competition on this podcast, but gee whiz, I've never heard anything like that. Holy shit.
Well, that's the other thing we talked about on my
dangerous.
podcast was like being trained to the point I can come on command. So just through my partner's voice, and we did a lot of training to get there, but like just the sound of his voice with the word now, and he would say it in a certain way, just like now, and I'd explode in orgasm. This is realms. This is like Olympic training of sexuality. It's realms that a lot of people don't want to go to, and I love it. I'm like, in the same way that I do with personal development, I'm like, is there something to experience? Can I learn? Can I grow? Like, go and show me the potential. I just want to experience the absolute height of my sexual potential. So that means getting fucked in my urethra and coming on command.
Oh my God. Yeah, urethral sounding is wild. I hadn't heard of it until I actually had a pro dom on the podcast, and she was saying that she hasn't tried it, but it's one of her like biggest things that she like wants to try and work up to
on herself.
So and that was
to do it to submissive men.
I think both.
Right. Oh, that's good, because I would say
herself
99% of people that even do sounding don't do female sounding. It's a very common male submissive act. But my partner was dominant; he was not submissive, but there's only me and one other woman that he would allow to do that for him because of the space we could hold. You really do. It's such a vulnerable thing. So he knew that my nurturing and my love, he would be safe enough to open to go to those places.
Yeah. Wow.
But I personally have not met another woman who's been sounded ever in my life.
Wow. Well, look, I'll tee you guys up if she hasn't tried it yet and she wants some advice. I imagine, like, where do you even get the instruments to do this?
Oh,
like,
man, I ordered some online and they got stopped at customs in Indonesia because, like, they're prohibited items. But I was hoping – my problem was I ordered double-ended dildos, metal dildos, glass dildos, a Wartenberg wheel, and the sounds. And so the package got stopped.
Okay.
So I had to go to customs in Denpasar and they had opened the box and photographed it all. And I sat down with this piece of paper that's all in Indonesian, just, I couldn't even say it. I was like, hello, I just need to pick up this package. And he typed it into the computer and then boom, like it's all just like the most fucking bizarre looking sex toys. And he was like, couldn't even look at me. He's like, this thing's not allowed, or I needed a medical license to import it. And I was like, oh my God. But yeah, you can definitely buy them on kink and fetish websites and even things like Amazon. They're there. People, it'll say urethral sound, but unless you know what you're looking for, everyone just thinks that's pretty little swizzle sticks.
Yeah. Oh my God. All right. Whoa. This one was jam-packed. Thank you so much, Erin.
Freya, it's such a pleasure, such a joy. Thank you so much.
And where can people find you and your work?
So Erin Kyna, I am the only Erin Kyna on the planet, so I'm very easy to find on Instagram and Facebook and email and website and all the usual things. And then I have my own podcast, of which I have had the beautiful Freya guest as well. That's called Romantic Hardcore, a podcast about sex and healing. So you can find me across all of those places. And I do online work with clients one-to-one. And I also do in-person work with one-to-ones and couples. So I teach these kind of kinky things, and I teach dominance and submission. And I'm also going on an Egyptian pilgrimage at the end of the year. So if you're feeling called spiritually to come with me to Egypt for an awakening, please reach out. I know that it's going to be insanely powerful. And that might be all my offerings. Oh, and shortly I'll be doing Kundalini awakening sessions as well. So Kundalini is another thing that will start to emerge over the next month or so.
Epic. All right. You're a bloody blast. We've had so many bonus TMIs come out of you.
I know. I can't wait till you and I are together in the flesh and doing offerings, girl. It's going to be so freaking awesome.
Yeah. Bali, look out.
Yeah.
All right, my love. Well, let's wrap it up there. Thank you, everyone. If you've stuck it out for the full hour and a half, we were trying to keep it short, but as usual, not a thing with my podcast. Awesome. Thanks so much, Erin.
Thanks, guys.
And that's it, darling hearts. Thank you for stopping by the Labia Lounge. Your bum groove in the couch will be right where you left it, just waiting for you to sink back in for some more double L action next time. And in the meantime, if you'd be a dear and subscribe, share this episode, or leave a review on iTunes, then you can pat yourself on the snatch, because that, my dear, is a downright act of sex-positive feminist activism. And you'd be supporting my vision to educate, empower, demystify, and destigmatize with this here podcast. Also, I'm always open to feedback, topic ideas that you'd love to hear covered, or guest suggestions. So feel free to get in touch via my website at freyagraph.com, or say hey over on Insta. My handle is Freya_graph_YMT, and I seriously hope you're following me on there, because damn, we have fun. We have fun. Anyway, later labial legends. I'll see you next time.